Hi, everyone. Welcome back to My Week is Booked. I'm Nikki, and I'm so glad you're here. If you're new to the podcast, this is where we journey through the 52 Book Club Challenge, a creative and sometimes surprising way to expand your reading horizons. Each episode, I explore a different prompt, sharing both a new to me book that fits the theme and some past favorites I've loved with the hope of inspiring you to pick up something new. This week, I stumbled upon some really exciting news that I just had to share. Did you know Liz Manigran, the creator of the 52 Book Club Challenge, is Canadian? I had no idea. I've been happily working through this challenge since last summer, and I just assumed she was American, which, of course, would have been totally fine. But as a fellow Canadian, finding out she's from British Columbia gave me such a proud neighbor moment. It's funny how these little details can make something feel even more personal. Okay, let's dive into this week's prompt. A book with a plot that includes a heist. This is for the week running from Monday, January 27th to Sunday, February 2nd. Can you believe it's almost February? This year is already flying by. Now, when I think of heist stories, my mind immediately goes to action, adventure, and thrillers. These aren't genres I typically read a lot of, so I was a little worried I might struggle to find recommendations for you. But it turns out heists aren't limited to those genres. They can pop up in all kinds of stories, and I actually have a bunch of great books to share with you today. Before we jump into my picks, though, let's talk about why heist stories are so appealing. For me, the best part is almost always the cast of characters. Heist stories tend to feature a diverse crew of fascinating individuals, each with their own quirks and specialties, all working toward a common goal. And while they might not always see eye to eye, the humor, banter, and occasional clashes make for such a fun dynamic. Another reason these stories are so compelling is the way they make you root for the crew. Even when they're not exactly the good guys, they're often set against an antagonist who's much worse. Someone so unsympathetic that you can't help but cheer for the team pulling off the heist. This anti hero angle makes their motivations relatable, even when their actions might not be entirely legal. Of course, we can't forget the suspense and excitement that comes with heist stories. The high stakes tension, the close calls, and the constant question of whether the crew will succeed or if everything will fall apart. It really keeps you on the edge of your seat. And if you're like me, a reader who basically watches every scene play out like a movie in your mind, these stories are just so much fun. They're like an action packed film in your own mental movie theater, and who doesn't love that? Now, let's get into some of my favorite books featuring heists. Before I start, I just want to point out that the Mysterious Benedict Society, which I talked about in episode 1, would be a perfect choice for this prompt if you're interested in a super fun, zany, middle grade heist story. But now, on to today's new books. Let's start with a book that might not immediately spring to mind when you think of heist stories, and that's Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. This isn't your typical heist novel. It's literary fiction, but it's threaded with mystery, humor, and so many unexpected twists and turns that it keeps you on your toes from start to finish. The story begins with what seems like a straightforward scenario: a failed bank robbery. The would be robber, in a panic, flees the scene and ends up taking a group of strangers hostage at an open house. It's a setup that feels like it should lead to a high stakes dramatic thriller. But this is Frederick Bachman, so what follows is anything but typical. As the hours tick by, we learn more about the hostages, the would be robber, and even the police officers trying to defuse the situation. Bachman masterfully reveals layer after layer of these characters' lives, showing how their paths have crossed in unexpected ways. There's an estranged father and son cop duo, a quirky real estate agent, an older couple with marital struggles, and a pregnant woman and her partner, each grappling with their own private fears and hopes. What makes Anxious People so special is how it transforms what could have been a tense and dire situation into a heartfelt, laugh out loud exploration of humanity. Just like in A Man Called Uwe, Bachman's signature blend of humor and emotional depth shines through, making you fall in love with characters who feel flawed, real, and relatable. Without giving too much away, because half the fun is the way this story continually surprises you, what starts as a heist unravels into something entirely different. The heist you think you're reading about shifts and evolves into a deeply moving tale about second chances, forgiveness, and the connections we form with others, often in the most unlikely of circumstances. For me, the heart of this book lies in its characters. Bachman has a way of making you care so deeply about them and their relationships that by the end, you're rooting for their happiness with all your heart. And while this isn't a traditional heist novel, it's a perfect example of how the heist trope can appear in unexpected genres and be reimagined into something fresh, funny, and heartwarming. If you're in the mood for a book that will make you laugh, cry, and think all at once, Anxious People is one I highly recommend. It's a story that surprises you at every turn and stays with you long after you've turned the last page. Now, if literary fiction isn't your usual genre and you're looking for something with a bit more magic and adventure, let's shift gears and talk about a fantasy heist story that's sure to pull you in. A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. This is the first book in an incredible trilogy, and it's perfect for anyone who loves immersive world building and characters that practically leap off the page. The story introduces us to Kel, one of the last Antari, magicians with the rare ability to travel between parallel Londons. In this world, there are four Londons, each with its own level of magic and atmosphere. Grey London, which is essentially our non magical world. Red London, where magic thrives and is revered. White London, where magic is dangerous and often deadly. And Black London, a once powerful realm now sealed off after being consumed by magic gone wrong. Kell serves as a messenger and smuggler between the Londons, slipping contraband across borders for a price, despite the strict laws against it. His smuggling gigs might not seem like much compared to an elaborate Ocean's 11 style heist, but things escalate quickly when a dangerous artifact from Black London, a relic of immense and corrupting power, falls into his possession. This artifact becomes the centerpiece of the story's heist element, Kell's mission to retrieve it and return it to its rightful place before it can wreak havoc across all the Londons. But of course, no heist is complete without a partner in crime, and that's where Lila Bard comes in. Lila is a street smart thief with dreams of grand adventures far beyond the dreary streets of Grey London. When she crosses paths with Kell, she's drawn into his mission and proves to be an invaluable, albeit unconventional, ally. Together, they must outwit powerful enemies, including a sinister pair of sibling rulers from White London who will stop at nothing to claim the artifact for themselves. What makes the heist element in A Darker Shade of Magic so gripping is how it blends cunning strategy, high stakes magical combat, and unexpected alliances. It's not just about sneaking and stealing, it's about navigating the treacherous dynamics of a multidimensional world where the risks are as big as the rewards. Schwab's storytelling is a perfect match for this theme, combining the thrill of a heist with rich, imaginative world building. The parallel Londons feel so distinct and vivid, each with its own history, culture, and relationship with magic. And while the story has plenty of action and suspense, it's the dynamic between Kel and Lila that truly shines. Their banter is sharp and often hilarious, and watching their reluctant partnership evolve into genuine camaraderie is such a treat. If you're a fantasy fan, or even if you're not but love a good heist story with a twist, this book is well worth your time. Schwab creates a world you won't want to leave, and A Darker Shade of Magic sets the stage for a trilogy that only gets better with each installment. Now, let's move on to a book that caught my eye for a very specific reason. Starter Villain by John Scalzi. I'll admit, I picked this one up solely because of the cover. A fluffy cat in a suit and tie? Say no more, I was sold. And while I'll confess that the cats weren't as prominent as I'd hoped, the book itself turned out to be an absolute blast and a perfect candidate for this week's theme. Starter Villain is a fast paced, tongue in cheek tale that follows Charlie, a down on his luck substitute teacher, whose life takes a bizarre turn when he inherits his estranged uncle's estate. But this isn't just any inheritance. It turns out his uncle was a full blown supervillain, complete with secret lairs, henchmen, and yes, an army of hyper intelligent cats. Oh, and let's not forget the talking dolphins, because why stop at villainous felines when you can throw in dolphins with an attitude? Suddenly, Charlie finds himself thrust into a world of global villainy, corporate espionage, and shadowy organizations vying for control. The heist elements in this book lean toward outsmarting powerful rivals, with Charlie trying to stay one step ahead in a morally gray, cutthroat underworld. From secret plots to daring operations, the story delivers plenty of the scheming and suspense you'd expect from a heist, but with Scalzi's signature humor and absurdity cranked up to 11. One of the things I loved about Starter Villain was how cinematic it felt. Scalzi has a gift for writing action packed sequences that play out like a blockbuster movie in your head, and this book is no exception. The humor is sharp, the characters are larger than life, and while I do wish the cats had played a bigger role, their moments of devious brilliance were unforgettable. And let's be honest, talking dolphins plotting alongside intelligent cats, that's the kind of wonderfully weird chaos I didn't know I needed. If you're looking for a heist story that doesn't take itself too seriously and fully embraces the ridiculousness of its premise, Starter Villain is a fantastic choice. It's a quirky, clever romp that turns the genre on its head and will definitely leave you grinning. When I first saw this week's prompt, the very first book that came to mind was The Gilded Wolves by Roshani Chokshi. This YA fantasy heist story is set in 1880s Paris, filled with lush descriptions, intriguing puzzles, and an unforgettable found family crew. I read this book back in 2021, and its characters and beautiful settings have stuck with me ever since. The story centers on Severin Montagnier Allery, a treasure hunter and a hotel owner who's been denied his rightful inheritance by the powerful Order of Babel. Determined to reclaim his birthright, Severin and his tight knit group of friends take on an ambitious heist to secure an artifact that could change everything. Each member of the crew brings their own unique talents and dynamic relationships to the mission. There's Layla, a talented dancer and pastry chef with a mysterious past, Zofia, an ingenious engineer, Enrique, a historian with a sharp mind and even sharper wit, and Tristan, Severin's loyal, animal loving brother figure. Their bond is what truly makes this story special, and their connection feels as strong as any family. The heist itself is intricately crafted, filled with clever twists, riddles, and moments of danger that keep you turning the pages. What makes it stand out, though, is how deeply the heist is tied to the characters' motivations and relationships. Each member of the crew has their own reasons for taking on the mission, and watching how their personal struggles intersect with the group's shared goal adds a layer of emotional depth to the story. And then there's the setting. Chokshi's descriptions of 1880s Paris are lush and atmospheric, with a steampunk inspired twist that gives the world an extra layer of magic and intrigue. From glittering ballrooms to mysterious archives, every location feels vividly alive and dripping with detail. It's the perfect backdrop for a high stakes heist, and it's impossible not to get swept up in the beauty of it all. Well, The Gilded Wolves is the first book in a trilogy. It remains my favorite of the series. The later books expand on the world and explore new locations, but for me, the magic of the characters and the plot truly shone brightest in this first installment. That said, the series as a whole is well worth reading, especially for the beautiful love story that unfolds after this first book. If you're a fan of YA fantasy with intricate plots, compelling characters, and a gorgeously imagined setting, the Gilded Wolves is an absolute must read. It's a book that combines heart, adventure, and magic into something truly special, and one I'll always recommend for a prompt like this. Now, if you're a fan of sci fi or just in the mood for something completely different from the other books I've mentioned so far, let me recommend Warcross by Marie Lu. This YA sci fi adventure is a fast paced, high tech heist story that's perfect for fans of Ready Player One or anyone who loves video games and futuristic technology. The story is set in a world where Warcross, a virtual reality game, has become a global obsession, not just as entertainment, but as an integral part of daily life. We follow Amika Chen, a teenage hacker and bounty hunter struggling to make ends meet. When a desperate attempt to make quick cash leads her to hack into the Warcross championships, Amika is caught, not by law enforcement, but by Hideo Tanaka, the enigmatic creator of the game. Rather than turning her in, Hideo recruits Amika to go undercover as part of a covert mission to track down a mysterious hacker known as Zero, who is threatening the security of Warcross. To carry out this mission, Amika joins the tournament as a competitor, becoming part of a colorful and diverse team of players. This team is where the heist element really comes alive. Amika's undercover work combines strategy, deception, and collaboration as the crew works together both inside and outside the game to uncover the truth behind Zero's plans. What makes Warcross so fun is how it immerses you in a world of cutting edge technology and jaw dropping virtual reality gameplay. The descriptions of the game sequences are exhilarating, but the futuristic Tokyo setting is equally vivid and stunning. Marie Lu does a fantastic job of making this world feel real and immersive, perfect brain movie material. As for the characters, the growing camaraderie between Amika and her team is a highlight. Each member brings unique skills and personalities to the table, and watching their friendships develop adds emotional depth to the high octane plot. If you're looking for a book that combines the thrill of a heist with the excitement of a sci fi adventure, Warcross is an absolute must read. It's fast paced, visually stunning, and filled with twists and turns that will keep you hooked until the very last page. At which point, you can go right into the second book in the duology, Wildcard. For the final book in this week's lineup, I'm taking us back to a beloved classic, The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. While it might not be the first title that comes to mind when you think of a heist, at its core, this fantasy masterpiece is built around one. The story follows Bilbo Baggins, which I'm sure most of you already know, an unassuming hobbit who finds himself swept into an adventure that's equal parts thrilling and heartwarming. Bilbo is recruited by Gandalf the wizard to join a company of 13 dwarves led by the determined Thorin Oakenshield. Their mission? To reclaim their ancestral home and treasure from the fearsome dragon Smaug, who has taken up residence in the Lonely Mountain. It's an epic quest, but when you strip it down, it's essentially a heist, complete with a crew of distinct characters, a target with immense stakes, and a plan that hinges on strategy, bravery, and a touch of luck. What makes The Hobbit such a timeless tale is its balance of whimsy and adventure. Tolkien's world building is legendary, and Middle Earth comes alive with vivid landscapes, dangerous encounters, and unforgettable creatures. From the dark and treacherous Mirkwood to the dazzling halls of Smaug's hoard, every setting feels rich and immersive. The heist itself is where Bilbo truly shines. Though he starts the journey as a reluctant participant, unsure of his own worth, he gradually discovers his courage, wit, and resourcefulness. His pivotal role in sneaking into Smaug's lair and confronting the dragon shows just how far he's come from the comfort of his hobbit hole. It's a classic hero's journey, but with a heist twist that makes it even more exciting. The cast of characters is another highlight. The dwarves, with their distinct personalities and humorous banter, form a tight knit group that you can't help but root for. Their camaraderie, combined with Bilbo's growing confidence and Gandalf's enigmatic guidance, creates a dynamic that's as heartwarming as it is entertaining. The Hobbit is a story about bravery, friendship, and finding unexpected strength within yourself, all set against the backdrop of a daring quest to reclaim what's been lost. It's a perfect choice for this week's theme, and whether you're revisiting it or reading it for the first time, it's a journey well worth taking. Before we move on to the book I chose to read for this week's prompt, I just want to take a moment to ask for your help in supporting My Week is Booked. If you've been enjoying the podcast, it would mean the world to me if you could subscribe, rate, or review it on your favorite podcast platform, or even share it with your book loving friends. These small actions make a huge difference. They help more people discover the show, and every new subscriber, review, or share helps grow this community of readers. Plus, it's always such a joy to hear your thoughts and know that you're out there listening and joining me on this reading journey. Thank you so much for all your support so far. It truly means everything to me, and I'm so excited to keep sharing more books and conversations with you. Now, choosing a book for this week's prompt was a challenge. There are just so many intriguing and fun heist novels out there. After a lot of deliberation, I decided on The Phoenix Keeper by S.A. McLean. I've been excited about this book since before it came out, and my daughter read it before me and insisted I had to read it too. I ended up giving the book 4 stars. I really enjoyed it, but there were a few elements that kept it from being a 5-star read for me. Let's start with what I loved most about it. The absolute highlight of The Phoenix Keeper is its setting, a zoo for magical creatures. As someone who used to work at the Toronto Zoo, I was blown away by how accurate and detailed this world felt. Ayla, the main character, works in a pavilion that reminded me so much of the one I used to work in. From the food prep and exhibit cleaning to the keeper talks and the dazzling Griffin show, everything felt spot on. I kept wondering how the author managed to get such an insider's perspective. Did she work in the same pavilion as me? And then there are the magical creatures. Oh my gosh, they're incredible. Each one is so vividly described and uniquely imagined, from adorable baby phoenixes to majestic dragons and so many more. For anyone who's an animal lover or has ever been fascinated by the idea of magical creatures, this book is a total delight. As a former zoo nerd, I could completely relate to Ayla and the other characters who dedicate their lives to caring for these creatures. That said, some aspects of the book didn't work as well for me. While this is marketed as adult fantasy, the main character, Ayla, felt much more like a YA protagonist. Her immaturity and some of the dialogue between her and the other characters pulled me out of the story at times. The dialogue, in particular, could feel a little cheesy and unnatural. Fortunately, I liked Ayla's friends much more than I liked her, which helped balance things out. As for the heist, it doesn't happen until very close to the end of the book, and it's carried out by a group of villains rather than the characters you've been following throughout the story. These bad guys are not exactly the lovable rogues you see in other heist novels. They're genuinely unsympathetic. While the heist itself is exciting and well executed, it's very different from the heist we've explored in the other books today. Still, it fit the prompt, even if it didn't play out in the way I initially expected. Overall, The Phoenix Keeper is a fun, imaginative read, and while it may feel a bit niche for fellow zoo nerds like me, I think anyone who loves magical creatures or is interested in the behind the scenes life of zookeeping will find plenty to enjoy here. Before we wrap up, I want to share an exciting milestone in my reading journey. I recently had the opportunity to read my first advanced reader copy. As someone who's new to Bookstagram, having just started my account alongside this podcast, it felt both thrilling and an honor to be approached by an independent author. Cooper S. Beckett kindly provided me with an arc of Osgood as Dead, the fourth installment in his fantasy horror series, The Spectral Inspector. I'm just realizing as I read this out loud that this book and the others in the series would all be perfect picks for the first prompt, a book with a pun in the title. Osgood as Dead continues the story of Prudence Osgood, a queer, alcoholic, supernatural investigator who, after surviving a devastating subway crash that killed hundreds in Chicago, finds herself suffering from locked in syndrome. Trapped within her own body, she becomes aware of a malevolent entity attempting to possess her. Once she recovers, Osgood and her team, the Spectral Inspectors, must confront a body hopping force that could be the avatar of a god, all while spectral forces besiege the city. Well, I found the plot imaginative and the characters well defined, especially considering I hadn't read the previous books in the series. There were aspects that didn't align with my personal reading preferences. The narrative includes graphic horror elements with intense scenes of violence and sexual content that, for me, were quite disturbing. It's important to note that this isn't a reflection of Beckett's writing skill. In fact, his prose is engaging, and I believe readers who appreciate the horror genre, particularly with graphic content, might find this series compelling. As a newcomer to ARCs and Bookstagram, navigating a review for a book that didn't entirely resonate with me has been a learning experience. However, I recognize that every reader has unique tastes, and while this book wasn't for me, it could be a perfect fit for others. And that's all for today. Thank you for joining me on this week's episode of My Week is Booked. I hope you found some intriguing reads to add to your list. I'll be back here next week to talk about books set in spring. Until next time, happy reading. I hope your week is filled with good books, hot tea, or coffee, or hot chocolate, cuddly cats, and cozy blankets. I am still workshopping this outro.